Hi there. Now I'm going to answer the questions you submitted regarding Elizabeth Holmes' possible sentence. Thank you very much for submitting these questions. Thank you to all of you subscribers. Welcome to you new subscribers. Please support my work by subscribing. This video is simply for education information, simply my opinion. And what's your analysis? What do you think is a possible sentence? So go to the community page, our community page, and vote in our poll. Do you think she's going to get the 15 years that the prosecution is recommending, the 9 years that probation is recommending, or the 18 months home detention, no prison that the defense is recommending? And I suggest that you go look at, I walked you through the two sentence recommendations. One by the prosecution, it's called Will Elizabeth Holmes Get the 15 Years video, or you can look at the video I did on Elizabeth Holmes' plea for leniency, where I walk you through the defense's recommendation. Okay, so in case you popped on this channel, Elizabeth Holmes was convicted in January of 2022 of 4 counts of wire fraud. Each one of those counts carries a 20-year maximum sentence and a $250,000 maximum fine and 3 years supervised release, not parole, supervised release. Okay, so let's get into your questions here. Number one. So David Anderton, thank you very much for your question. Thank you for subscribing. His question is, if Holmes is sentenced to more than 10 years, I think that Holmes would have to serve some time in a low as opposed to minimum security prison. Perhaps that was a factor in the probation sentence report, suggesting a 9-year sentence. Okay, so David, there are 3 factors. I'm just getting this from the prosecution's sentencing memo, where they talk about the probation may have been persuaded based on these 3 factors to give Elizabeth Holmes a reduction in her sentence. And those 3 factors are trauma, collateral punishment, and family support. Now, collateral punishment goes to the national media attention that she's gotten. The defense is arguing that she's already been penalized. She's already paid the price for this. Therefore, she shouldn't go to prison. They're also claiming that the trauma, the alleged rape at Stanford when she was I think a freshman, or maybe it was the first semester of sophomore year, and the alleged abuse, the domestic violence, or the influence or the control of Sunny Balwani, those are the factors that it looks like the probation considered when they recommended a reduced sentence. Not the 15 years the prosecution is recommending, but 9 years probation is recommending. And that would be in the pre-sentence report, which is confidential. So I don't have that. And a lot of the defense's sentencing memo was redacted, blacked out. So I don't know some of this. Again, this is just my opinion. But those are the 3 factors that were indicated that the probation department relied upon to recommend a reduced sentence for Elizabeth Holmes. So as far as where she would be housed, that's up to the Bureau of Prison. So the Bureau of Prison determines where federal offenders, which prison they go to. Now, if Elizabeth Holmes is pregnant, there are certain facilities that pregnant women go to. Okay, and let me tell you where those are located. They're called mint facilities, as in peppermint, but it's really mint. Or maybe as in coin mints, M-I-N-T. And that stands for Mothers and Infants Together. Okay, those facilities are, if Elizabeth gets sent to one of these, the locations are Phoenix, Arizona, Tallahassee, Florida, Springfield, Illinois, Fort Worth, Texas, Hillsborough, West Virginia. And there may be others, but those are the ones that are indicated on the Bureau of Prison website, okay? And again, we'll probably find this out in sentencing. So let's see what happens. All right, so David, thank you for your question. So N Diamond, thank you for subscribing, and thanks for your comment and question. And she asked, will Elizabeth have to report immediately to prison after sentencing? That's up to the judge. The judge has many options here. And again, I don't know what's in the pre-sentence report, the probation report. They could have already indicated what location she'll be sent to. They could have already indicated what date she will be surrendering. Or they could have indicated she'll be surrendering at sentencing. I don't know. And again, the judge has many options. The judge could require her to surrender at sentencing. They could wait until the Bureau of Prisons places her and have her surrender at that location. Again, it's up to the judge. He determines what the appropriate sentence is and what the terms of the sentencing are. So Ann Diamond goes on to say, also after reading a little of the defense's argument, and I did a video, and if you want to look at it, I walked you through the defense's argument, the recommendation for sentencing. It's called the plea for leniency video. So Ann Diamond says, I find it absurd that they're trying to paint Elizabeth Holmes in this halo of light where they talk about Elizabeth Holmes being a young crusader for a better world and just simply made mistakes. Nope. In this story, the honorable young crusaders are Tyler Schultz and Erica Chung, who risked their careers and so much more to speak up about the company's deceptions and failures that had the potential to do harm, to do real harm to patients, all against the backdrop of being bullied by Elizabeth, Sunny, and their legal army. The Ericas and Tylers of the world are the righteous and ethical young professionals that I put my faith in. And that's what Ann Diamond said. And I think many people would agree with you. So we'll see what happens in sentencing. Thank you for your comment and your question and for subscribing. Okay, so and his band. Thank you to you too for your comment, your question, and for subscribing. This is what and his band said. It seems that Holmes is aiming to redefine the term stay-at-home mom. That's good. That's really good. So, Joanna Moyle, thank you for subscribing, and here's her comment or question. She says, another great video. Thank you, Joanna. I find that character testimonies hard to take seriously. In my opinion, Elizabeth Holmes is a master of manipulation, and her decision to become pregnant while facing significant jail time demonstrates that perfectly. Shameful, Joanna says. Well, just to keep in mind, pregnancy alone is not an aggravating or reducing factor. It's whether or not Holmes qualifies under that loss of caretaker where the judge can consider a reduction. And again, it's his discretion as to how much or any reduction he gives Elizabeth Holmes. But she has to show that her caretaking role is irreplaceable. So I think probably the prosecution will argue it's not irreplaceable. The child's father, Elizabeth Holmes' partner, is available and qualifies as a caretaker. So she shouldn't get any reduction. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. So thank you, Joanna, for your question. So Catherine says, hi, Michele. Thank you for sharing your analysis. You're welcome. If Holmes does go to prison, what type of prison do you think they would place her in? Given the type of crime she committed. Well, I think if she's pregnant, she'll probably go to one of those mint facilities that I just mentioned. Maybe it's the Arizona location. I don't know. That might be the closest. We'll see what happens. So another subscriber, SBK Pilot, if she receives a slap on the wrist, it will send a very bad message that there are no consequences for this kind of widespread fraud. As I said from the very beginning, from my first video, you can go look at it, calculating the Elizabeth Holmes sentence. I said it will not be a slap on the wrist. It won't. And based on the recommendation by probation of 9 years, after doing the calculation, after interviewing Elizabeth Holmes, after talking to the patients, after talking to the investors, after compiling all the information regarding loss, probation recommended 9 years. So that's not a slap on the wrist. Okay. And by the way, as the prosecution pointed out in their sentencing memorandum that I just went through in the video, if you want to take a look at it, that the prosecution says 15 years video, in there, a Walgreens consultant who talked to Sunny Balwani and Elizabeth Holmes in a teleconference. The prosecution says I think his name is Kevin Hunter. He was hired by Walgreens to evaluate Theranos, to give an opinion, and according to that prosecution memorandum, Kevin Hunter says that he warned Elizabeth Holmes about, people are going to be relying on this. They're going to be making medical decisions based on these results. You could potentially end up killing people. And he says, and you can look at the memo and you can look at the video I did, he says that Elizabeth responded with, "They don't send pretty people like me to jail. They don't send pretty people like me to jail." She's correct. They send you to prison. So we'll see what happens at sentencing. Okay, so next question. Oh, and there's another thing in that prosecutor's memo. You again look at the video I did on the 15-year sentence video. The prosecution says that Holmes was not motivated by short-term financial gain. I thought that was pretty interesting. Okay, so next question. Is she eligible for parole after 2 years? Again, it's not parole, it's supervised release. I doubt it, okay? There are credits that you can get in the federal system. So in other words, even if she's sentenced to 15 years, 20 years or whatever, 9 years, 2 years, federal offenders don't serve the 100% of their sentence. They get less than that based on whatever credits the Bureau of Prison recommends, okay? So here's another question from another subscriber. So Lynn B said, can she stay out of a very deserving prison sentence while her attorneys waste more money and time trying to get her off by filing motions and appeals? Interesting question, Lynn, and thank you for subscribing. Thanks for your question. Look, every defendant has a right to appeal. They can exhaust all the appeals. But the question is, will Elizabeth Holmes, assuming she's sentenced to prison, will she spend that time out of prison, awaiting the outcome of an appeal? Now, most appeals generally take, 2 years or so. And usually what happens when defendants are sentenced to significant prison time, and in this case, I think she's going to get significant prison time, they are not out waiting. In other words, they go to prison and they spend time in prison waiting the outcome of their appeal. And I think that's probably what's going to happen. But we'll see. Again, it's the judge's discretion. Thanks for your question, Lynn. So Corcoy, thank you for subscribing. Thanks for your question. How likely is it for the judge to apply an upward departure, meaning increase the recommended sentence from the probation department? How likely is it for the judge to give Elizabeth Holmes more than 9 years? Well, it's possible. If you look at, maybe I can show this to you. It's in the video I did on prosecution says 15 years, but here is the calculation, the prior sentences that you might want to look at. The average sentence, and they looked at 29 offenders over the last 4 years who are in this, similar to Elizabeth Holmes, but all at level 43, which is the maximum you can get. She exceeded it according to the prosecution, because if it's 800 million loss, that's far in excess of 550 million. But anyway, here's the average sentence for those 29 offenders was 226 months. Not the 9 years probation is recommending, but the median length of sentence was 180 months, which is the 15 years that the prosecution is recommending. But if you look at all these other sentences, other cases, 8.6 billion got 120 months. That's interesting. These are cases across the federal district court, across all the federal courts across the United States, and you can go ahead and look at this. More than 100 million got 204 months, but that's not with probation. That's less than even what the prosecution is recommending. But go down and look here. See the EJD where I highlighted EJD? That's this judge. What did he do on 2 prior cases? $45 million in loss. The defendant got 140 months with cooperation with the prosecution. There's no cooperation here or any indication that I know of. And then here's another case, approximately 45 million loss. The judge sentenced with no cooperation 130 months. Now again, the prosecution is asking for 180 months. Probation's asking for 108 months. So you can take a look at these different sentences. Judges in New York, in Northern California, which is this district, Connecticut, you can look at these. And you can see that there's a widespread range of possible, of sentences of other fraudsters across the federal bench. Okay. Even though we have these sentencing guidelines, which are advisory, not mandatory. So that means each federal judge makes a determination on what the appropriate sentence is, looking at these guidelines, but it's their discretion whether to increase it or decrease it, depending on what special factors they're dealing with that defendant. Okay? So I hope that answered your question. And then he or she also asked, what is my opinion on how fair the justice system is? Well, that's a whole nother video, isn't it? And when it comes to demographics in general, race, gender, class, etc. Well, I'm sure you can Google, I'm sure there's plenty of studies on, how sentences are applied, regardless of many different factors, age, location, the amount of loss, who the victims were, all of that. Any kind of trauma, media attention, In this case, Elizabeth is basically arguing, as the prosecution pointed out, that she wants a sentence reduction because of all the media attention. The prosecution is saying, no. She used the media. She had the media tout all the wonderful things. Fortune magazine did an article of her. I think a couple of them. And then there's Wall Street Journal articles, talking about the revolutionary technology that Theranos was providing. But she wants that to be used to reduce her sentence. When she used, could be argued, she sought out the media, right? Okay, so next question. Yatsu asked, and I hope I'm saying your name right this time. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you very much for your question. The question is, could it be that the lack of remorse in portraying Elizabeth Holmes as a saint might actually upset the judge and she will eventually get a higher sentence than she might if she at least took some responsibility? Well, that's very valid, very valid. And as I was watching her testify for 7 days, I kept saying, is she going to admit any responsibility? Is she going to demonstrate her awareness of the gravity of the offenses, at the harm, the potential harm? What happened to the patients? The investors lost their money. What's the potential harm here? My opinion, I didn't see it. I didn't see her demonstrate her awareness of the gravity of her offense. I didn't see her demonstrate any remorse. She did take responsibility for those logos, misappropriating those logos that she put on reports that were given to investors and prospective investors. But I didn't see it. Again, I don't know what letters, what information the probation department has, because the pre-sentence report is confidential. But I will say they are still recommending 9 years in prison. So we'll see if she speaks at sentencing. And if she demonstrates to the court that she understands and takes responsibility. I mean, CEOs every day take responsibility for problems with their products, for mistakes that were made. So we'll see if she speaks at sentencing. Okay, so thank you for that question. So Line Screw, thank you very much for subscribing and for your comment. The sentencing submission is merely an elaborate shotgun approach. This is relating to the defense's sentencing memo. It's an elaborate shotgun approach to throw out all arguments, including specious and poorly rooted ones, in a vain attempt that at least something hits the target. I am doubtful that the judge will deviate much from a 9 to 15-year sentence. That's the 9-year probation, the 15 prosecution. There isn't anything unique to the fundamentals of this case that demands a departure in sentencing for Holmes. Well, whatever was submitted, probation was only persuaded to reduce her sentence to 9 years. It went from, it's an 11-year reduction, but it's still 9 years in prison, not home detention. Okay? So, 2 other questions. So, thank you, Line Screw, for that question. Victor asked, will she be remanded pending appeal? Again, I think I answered that. It's up to the judge whether she's out of custody waiting the appeal outcome. I don't think so. I think this is going to be a situation where she's going to go to prison. Okay? So thank you for that question. And Hugo asked whether she'll be handcuffed in court. Well, if the judge remands her to custody immediately, again, I don't know what's in the pre-sentence report, if they've identified where she's going and whether she's going to be transferred at sentencing or whether she's going to surrender and submit at some later point. I don't know that because the pre-sentence report is confidential. So we'll see what happens at sentencing. So those are the questions I've received. I hope if you have any other questions, please do leave them in the comment. I want to know what your analysis, because this video is simply my opinion. It's my analysis. So hit that like button, share these videos, and thank you so much for subscribing. And please do subscribe. Please support my work by subscribing. And if you want to contribute to me making these videos, I'll put a PayPal link in the description box below the video. So thank you very much for watching.